Yeah, and I think some Cosmos people, at least that I've talked to, they also see that as a potential downside, that Polkadot started with this initial artificial scarcity, but now you see actually it's more getting more and more democratic, easier for parachains to be onboarded, and I think also through para threads in the future there might be a more scalable onboarding for those chains to lease security. But yeah, that's interesting. And how do you view? I mean, you guys are a core part of the Polkadot ecosystem. How do you view this ecosystem as of today, in terms of DEXs, in terms of liquidity, in terms of DeFi? Because as of my understanding, Composable also aims to become a cross-chain DeFi hub within like based on substrate, but also connecting to other ecosystems, right? So maybe you can walk us through a little bit about the current stage of the Polkadot ecosystem and how you guys want to position Composable within that ecosystem to become a predominant DeFi hub.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think generally speaking, Polkadot is very early with DeFi. There hasn't been a ton of stuff yet, and a lot of teams within the Polkadot ecosystem have basically just added EVM to their chain, and that's kind of how they're spinning up initial DeFi. So I think in many ways, like Polkadot has not seen its season yet. It's definitely behind. Like there's no like osmosis. Obviously, there's like some lending. There's I believe a lending market that has popped up, but still like very nominal TVL. So we're definitely in the very early days. So for us, like our core focus really has been kind of two key things. One, XCVM, this cross-chain virtual machine, to essentially allow developers who write COSM-WASM smart contracts to be able to deploy cross-chain applications. Now, what does that actually mean? Underneath that, we have a series of trustless bridges, such as Centauri, our bridge to Cosmos. We have planned bridges with other ecosystems as well that support litecoin-based bridging. Essentially, this XCVM lives on top of these trustless bridges and orchestrates communication from essentially dApp to dApp. So you'd be able to write something as general as, take my USDC, swap it for X, and then liquidity provide using, X and some other asset that's also sitting in my wallet. That's really the vision of XCVM. And so what we've done in the meantime, as we're building towards that vision, we've also built sort of examples of substrate-based DeFi that would actually live as pallets on our parachain. So they would actually live as modules on this actual hub. And this includes our DEX, Pablo, and then we have several other projects under incubation through Composable Labs that provide leverage and several other sort of DeFi primitives, options, etc. So we're definitely hoping that the sort of Cambrian explosion happens first with substrate-based DeFi. So being able to interact with applications using assets such as DOT and KSM, but then sort of being able to have these trustless bridges to allow people from other ecosystems to interact with the DeFi that we've built on this hub, and then sort of eventually from there having developers be able to write kind of blockchain agnostic applications that sort of execute DeFi no matter what ecosystem specified more on what they'd like to accomplish versus how.
Would it be fair to say that XCM, which is this interoperability standard, is that kind of like the equivalent of IBC to the substrate world, or?
Actually, it's not. It's not, and the reason is because IBC, Cosmos, and parachains have a very, very different architecture. In the relation architecture, you have parachains, you have parasite chains, but then in Cosmos, you actually have standalone chains that provide their own security. And so, from the relay chain perspective, because it's a completely different architecture, and both chains have a mutual trusting point. Messages are actually routed through the relay chain, whereas in IBC, messages are routed through relayers, as you know. But at a deeper level as well, because these parachains are actually supposed to be application blockchains. XCM is actually sort of like chain level messaging, so you can send messages from a chain to another chain, because the executor for these messages are actually there's actually a module on the parachain, right? So whereas IBC is more generic and allows you to do DApp to DApp level messaging. So if you have a contract on one chain, you can interact with a contract on another chain through IBC. It's very seamless. It's designed for this purpose. Whereas with XCMP, you start to run into issues.
Yeah.